in previous talks, and you alluded to it a bit in this one, the importance of prototyping, and you showed this nice processing sketch for making this this river piece. So there's a lot of software and some hardware prototyping, and things. You need this because things go wrong. You've sometimes shown me some examples where things have failed, and you have to regroup and do something else. So this is important, and you need to build in this time.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I hid all that from this presentation, but I can tell you, for example, for this installation, we did basically actually we did three, so we were commissioned to do 3 parts, but in the end, actually we built 4. We spent, I don't know, 2 or 3 months making the 3 because we didn't have the thing running. But once you would see it running in a workshop, you can instantly see what works and what doesn't. So suddenly, because of all the work, prototyping and sketching the tools for making it, then starting using that as an instrument became super fast because you could really understand. So like, there were so many things, how they so in the software models, you have light and shadow reflection. But in the real model, you have 2 objects that are partially overlapping and there's 3 sources of light to get these beautiful back and forth double reflections that suddenly created completely different feel to this space, and then starting playing with the edges of this invisible light cone, all these kind of things then came by only having had the thing in the workshop first. Really prototyping the parts.
Yeah. I know you have some internships sometimes. What kind of skills do you look for? Do you take interns? When, where, how?
Yes. Actually, right now we're desperately looking for good user experience design, like UI, UX designers, not for internship only, but also as a full-time employees. But yeah, internships, yes. The challenge is a little bit that because we're doing random different things. So planning an internship to say, okay, it's these 2.5 months. It's difficult to say what will happen in those 2.5 months. The traditional German system in this sort of a work apprenticeship structure, the internship used to be half a year to 1 year. So I think it was better for us in that sense, but now it's also in Germany the master's, bachelor structure, meaning the internships are generally shorter.
In terms of skills, hardware, software, prototyping, and things like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like what I showed the first half, all this exhibition design stuff. We are 50 people. There's maybe maximum, I would say 5 to 7 people working on project like this. And then there would be 20 people, 25 people working on a micro zoo because of the scale. So in terms of the skill sets, it's often it's much harder in the process to find the right moment for electronics hacking for things like this, because they happen more sparsely in different places. So there's definitely sort of a spatial communication, information, experience design, these kind of things that are really very much the bulk of the work that we are doing. Also from the mobile device interfaces to 3D real-time, this and that, to filmmaking and so forth.
Okay.
Hello, may I ask you, is in this kind of business or art installation interaction business big competition? Because it feels like it's quite hard to get this working. And
yeah, Well, I would say today is not as hard as it used to be. So definitely the sort of tool chains and processes have made it like all this kind of stuff much more accessible. At the same time, it's not so common to maybe have this sort of a hybrid sets of people. So normally you would have exhibition designers who have the sort of project management, graphic design, exhibition architecture, and the content structuring at hand. And then they would subcommission maybe an artist to do something, or they would say, here's the specs of a piece of software that we would like to put here. And then some other company would be doing the software to run on somebody else's design thing that will be running on somebody else's exhibition. So we are kind of funny mix because we are kind of in between these three areas. So we have the biggest single unit, if you will, is software development. There's less designers than software developers at ART+COM. And then the sort of project management, media planning, and keeping the boat running are then, I don't know, maybe 15-20% of the people. So yes, there's lots of competition, but it's spread differently. So this kind of a across-the-board approach that we have is not so common. And we also then, within the studio, we do smaller teams doing different things that don't cover the whole full skill set of the house.
Yeah.
How do you divide up roles and working in the team? Like, do you tend to mix and match quite a lot? Like, would it be quite common that sometimes the software guys will be doing the design and sometimes the designers will be doing the prototyping, or do you tend to stick to the roles?
It's so we do have like this. There's I would say, well, maybe 30% of our designers would have computational design in their business card. So they implicitly sit in between. There are some software developers who are very much more kind of keen to being part of the design process and are much more active in that, even though in their contract it says software development. But there's definitely, it's very easy to be kind of fall back into the standardized, I know this thing, I'll stick to this, and then since you did that thing well that time, then the same kind of things go to that person. So we try to break it, but also this more kind of a larger scale systems solutions, like making a BMW museum, or this even the Microzoo thing. There's a huge server room and many connected things. There's this sort of level of kind of professionalism at the level of system, so like IT infrastructure, that at some point doesn't scale into the computational design, making that one thing that works really nice on my computer, but it doesn't necessarily scale if you have to spread it across 7 computers running on Unity with some sort of a syncing server and so forth. So it gets very complicated. So there's no clear answer to that. Different things are differently, and we're struggling to not fall into the tight labeling and categorization.
I was wondering how the timescale of the outcome affects your process and outcome, in the sense that if you're working for the museums, the work will be there for 5, 10, 15 years, whereas in the Sonar project, it's a week, perhaps.
Yeah, 3 days.
3 days, and one might even argue that in the museum you had this animation that already tends to look old, you said,
yeah.
Whereas visually the Sonar perhaps is longer lasting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, luckily enough, the Sonar piece was commissioned to now go to South Korea for 6 months non-stop, and maybe there's a few more opportunities after that. So it does have like, so it was actually good that we had that in mind, that actually the biggest challenge with that was to make it installable in a day. Not that it has to run only for 3 days, but how you plan the process of getting it in there and configure it and fine-tune and calibrate it in that one day that you had to actually hoist the stuff up. 1 day of preparing and 1 day of installing. I would still say that, okay, so the dinosaur animation is 10 years old now. But given the context that the story is in the physical bones in your face and then the story inside the device, that it still is good enough for that context. So it definitely has longer time span than if it was in a plastic bezeled screen. But of course, every tool has its own aesthetic, and if you make your tool like this kinetic sculpture, then you define the aesthetic, and maybe in that sense it's more timeless than if you use existing framework in software with the interaction techniques that come out of the box provided by somebody else.
You showed two pieces there that you then repeated. So do you find that somebody sees a piece of your work and they say, we want one of those?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say, that the moral of the story with showing these three things that look the same, but for me they're completely different, is that, so normally what happens is that somebody comes to us, we saw this thing, we want to have that as well, can we have it in green? And then it's like, well, that's very nice, exciting, let's talk. And then when you sit down and talk and you realize that actually, no, that is not the right thing or the best thing or even vaguely feasible. So it's more like, so the we want that thing is kind of a conversation opener. Yeah. But at the same time, I have no problem in making one more of those devices that looks like a periscope, because it's the story behind it. I mean, how many painters would think, it's yet another painting. I don't want to do another painting with the brush. So it's like, it's not about the technology at the level of, okay, it's got a display and it's got so and so, but it's how does the story relate to the physical construct that you use to communicate it.
Okay, so with that, we go to the work and the drinks, and thank you, Jussi, for...
Thank you very much.